So at this particular time, we want to give a warm Kiwanian welcome to Mayor D. Gary Davis.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, I could talk a long time on things that's been said here today. Kay refreshed my memory on something. Why did I get involved with Kiwanis? And I don't go back as far as you do, but I go back to early 80s, I believe. Why did I want to join Kiwanis instead of Rotary or one of those other clubs? But I grew up in 4-H. 4-H was a big thing for me. And I got to compliment Hannah, and this goes way before Kay. The 4-H leaders didn't look like that when I was in 4-H. Mr. Paysinger was a skinhead, bald-headed old fellow that we weren't recruited because of things like that. But I was big in 4-H, and I could always get to the county speech contest, but I could never win the county. I said, man, I need to join that club. They need some better members in there, better judges. So I got in and started judging for a while. I haven't done it in a long time now, and most of you, if you're new, you don't even know I'm a Kiwanis member, but I still pay my Kiwanis dues, still a member. I just attend about once a year.
You got a new badge.
And I've got one of the new badges. You're right. I couldn't believe I still had a badge in there, but I appreciate that. Appreciate all that you all do. The RAM Clinic is a wonderful thing that comes through our area every once in a while, so I applaud you for being involved with that. They provide a lot of different kinds of health care to citizens of need in our community, so really appreciate you being a part of that. The banner's here, and he'll sneak out in a minute too, but he came the other day and heard most of what I have to say, and the media is wanting to ask me about another subject nowadays that I refuse to talk about because I encourage you people to talk about it. It's not my intention to talk about that subject, but as I ended it that day, I said it's just a thought, and it's surprising to me the people that have texted or Facebooked or whatever and said, well, I didn't know that was an option. I didn't know that that was one of the things that we could look at. That's why it was just a thought. I thought that it's something, if you were interested in, you could proceed with. I'm not promoting it. We're so fortunate here to have two wonderful school systems. We really do. But I think we should always be looking at ways to improve and make things even better, especially for our kids. And that's what it's all about. Talk about it. If it's something that interests you, that you think could happen, it'd be a long process. But if it's not, so be it. I've done my job. It's just a thought. As I started last week when the banner was listing, I quoted an article that was in the banner. Number 3, if you look at the top 10 stories last year, and we made it to number 3, and I kidded them and said it should have been number 1. But number 3 story was about industry. It was about business in, it might have even said Cleveland. A lot of times they say Cleveland. They don't say Bradley County. Cleveland could not be here if it wasn't for Bradley County. But anyway, businesses in Bradley County, all the growth that we're talking about in recruiting industry. But to quote some of the things from that article, a series of news articles announcing several new industries that will create an abundance of jobs over the next decade landed number 3. Since 2020, Cleveland and Bradley County have attracted more than $800 million, I think it's actually $900 million, in the industrial investment. And joining the roster as new ones in Bradley County, Cleveland and Bradley County, are SK Food Group, Formulated Solutions, Wind River Custom Homes, Kroger Central Fulfillment, and Amero International. And a lot of people say, when we talk about the number of jobs, they'll say, why are you bringing all those jobs here? We don't, and really, whenever we're recruiting, one of my biggest things is, do we have the people to fulfill those jobs? So when we're talking about the 2,000 or whatever it is in jobs over the next few years, it's actually about 300 a year. Somebody mentioned growth there a minute ago. Our biggest challenge, in my opinion, we work hard at growing, but we're mostly working at retaining and filling where we've lost. Just this week, a company announced they were closing. 34 employees were going to be needing help to get found jobs and so forth. The development district, who handles workforce development for this area, contacted them the very next morning, and it was already worked out. They didn't even need their help. That's the kind of thing that I'm talking about in bringing people in, but also working with existing industry. That's a company that, for whatever reason, will no longer be here, but someone has already moved right in and taking on those jobs. So that's good news. Mayor Brooks has already reported in the news, but Monday evening, I thought it was interesting that he actually acknowledged this, but the state commissioner from economic development sent out a text and he said, Mayor Davis, just wanted to let you know that during calendar year 23, Bradley County had the most new jobs announced from our department, highest among all 95 counties. Now, that's great bragging news, don't get me wrong. Top in all of the 95 counties is the number of jobs that we've recruited in Bradley County. He's referring to only the number of jobs that the state participated in, and not nearly all of our jobs go through the state. They help us a lot, don't get me wrong, but to think that we beat out the Memphises and the Nashvilles and the Knoxvilles and wherever that mega center is going in, mega site is in West Tennessee, number one in the state, that is great bragging rights. They're only reporting about 1,500 jobs, which is about half of what we actually recruited. But to go further into that economic development, most of these you've heard of, but just to go down them as a list at one time is pretty amazing. Duracell expansion, 25 million, 25 jobs. Formulated Solutions, 43 million, 700 new jobs. Formulated Solutions, anybody here from Formulated? You know, we had Dr. Scholl's many years ago, and then it changed names 2 or 3 times. I think the last one was Beiersdorf, is that right? And they announced, hey, we're done. We're out of here, and we're laying off 200 or 300 people. We were able to work with Formulated Solutions. They came in, took over the site, and are actually adding jobs. So a $43 million investment with 700 new jobs. That's a huge facility that will be sitting up there empty, is my point. We work on recruiting new ones, but we also work at filling what we have and also expanding what we have, the Duracell expansion. Kroger Pharmacy, talk about Duracell. Remember they used to have 2 locations? They closed one and condensed it down to one location, at least in Cleveland. And so that other building had been somewhat empty for a time. Kroger Pharmaceuticals moving into there. That's a $40 million investment and 140 new jobs, and well-paying jobs, I might say. You know, we've had Peyton's here for years, which distributes for Kroger, but the pharmaceutical division was separate, and so now you'll have the pharmaceutical division coming out of Cleveland and Bradley County also, going in an existing building that had been vacated. If you've been in the industrial park lately, somebody asked me yesterday, what's that huge facility going on down there? SK Food Group, a $232 million investment, 840 jobs, but not tomorrow, over time. That's the good thing, is it's over time. We couldn't take them all at once. But $232 million investment, 840 new jobs, and that's going in the industrial park. And if you've not been down there, you can actually see it from the interstate. But you need to drive down there. It's a very huge facility, and it's coming along pretty fast. Huge facility. What do? Well, they make food. That's part of their name, Food Group. But if you're, what's that expensive coffee called? Starbucks, yeah. See, this is a test. I'm not a Starbucks person. I drink coffee 24/7, and Starbucks is too strong and costs too much. I couldn't afford to drink Starbucks 24/7. But if you go in there, they do have food, right? SK Food that's one of their big customers is Starbucks. So that food that you see in the Starbucks will start being made here in Cleveland and Bradley County. But they distribute all over the country. So their new location will be here. Newlyweds Foods, an existing industry, a $2.5 million expansion, 42 new jobs. Lindy, 70 million, 23 jobs. Ecoat.us, 5 million, 50 new jobs. Sampson Controls, 2.5 million. Wind River Custom Homes. This is a unique one. They make the modular homes, but they also make the tiny homes. They're actually moving here from another location, but that's a $14 million investment, 77 new jobs. We also work to stay diversified, and we didn't have a company that made homes, so that was a new one. We didn't have one that made food products like SK Foods, so we want to stay diversified so that when the economy goes bad like it did in 08 and 09, and Dalton about went bankrupt, we kept going right along because we were diversified. Dalton was all in home building material, flooring and so forth. So it really hurt them. Amero International is going in the new spec building. When you first go in the industrial park, Spring Branch, you've got, what's the name of the one on the left? Anyway, the new industry on the left and the spec building on the right, and that's Amero International. What do? The main thing they do is they make titanium for various industries, but one of their biggest, they supply titanium to the defense industry. So That's something we don't have, and you'll hear a lot about them over the years. I think they're moving a lot of their office type people here also. So sort of like with Valker, you not only recruit the industry, you hope to have the headquarters at one day, and I hope to live long enough that will happen with Valker. Valker USA, located in Cleveland and Bradley County. They've already on their second expansion up there, by the way, and I think that is their ultimate goal down the road, and hopefully it is, because Valker has proven to be a good corporate partner in our community. They provide a lot of really good paying jobs. But to recap all of that, since January of 20, that's 3 years, over the last 3 years, $947 million investment and 2,700 jobs. That's why number one last year in the state. Enough on industry. To go back to our budget a little bit, I always talk about boring subjects, and I know that, but I always challenge you whenever other people come here, ask them about the boring subjects, because you don't usually hear about budgets, you don't hear about audits, you don't hear about how you're spending your ARP money, how you're spending your opioid money. I'm happy to talk about it because I'm actually very proud of it. Most of the growth, it's all in Bradley County, but again, most of it does happen in the city, of course, and so your infrastructure becomes more and more issues. We don't pass the buck to the city. When I go down this list, you'll see, well, we're working on infrastructure also, even though a lot of it might happen to be in the city. But this current year, no tax increase, of course, no new taxes created, no increase in fees, and we've set aside $5 million for future school expansions. That's all very important to work in the game plan of not increasing taxes over time. The opioid settlement, you hear a little bit about that in the news, but those lawsuits have gone on for the last several years, and finally the state has won, and most of it's been solved. And this current year, we received over $700 million in opioid funds. And again, I'm proud of how we're spending it. We're spending some of it. It's got to be spent on prevention, abatement, and remediation. We're spending some of it on law enforcement for the Drug Task Force. We've established a juvenile drug court, additional funding for the adult drug court. First responders, it all started in COVID and continues today, but mental health issues with first responders. That's law enforcement, fire, ambulance. Guess that's everyone. But anyway, some money set aside for mental health support for those agencies. And then we're also giving money to different organizations that help in the fight with the opioid problem. And that's programs like ATS The Bridge, Boys and Girls Club, Foundation House Ministries, The Caring Place, and just this week the commission approved a proposal I had to finish the vape detectors at Walker Valley High School. They had put in vape detectors, and we could talk about vaping and opioids the whole time, but I'm trying to just touch on it. But they'd put them in at Walker Valley. They didn't have enough to do the entire school, so the commission approved spending some money of this opioid money to finish Walker Valley. And then if it proves to be as successful as they believe, then I assume it will go to Bradley and maybe the middle schools in Cleveland and so forth. But at least when we get through with this, Walker Valley will have the vape detectors. The kids are vaping. That's where most of the problem is starting. I think most of you know that if you're involved in education. It starts with vaping. We all a lot of people encourage people to vape instead of smoking. It's proven to be worse than smoking, plus it gets them involved in lots of other things that's in those vapes. And so the vaping, you can't go to the bathroom and smoke, you get in trouble, but you can go to the bathroom and vape. If they don't have the vape detectors, that's what's been happening. So education people have convinced us that that's the need they have the most of, we need these detectors in the bathrooms and places in the school so that we know when that's happening and we can stop it. So that's why that. But that's how we're spending the opioid money this year. The lawsuit was a 17-year settlement, so we'll be getting money each year for the next 17 years. It'll vary each year. It starts coming in about February, and each year, the way I hope to be able to do it again next year is once we receive it and we know how much we've received, then we'll budget it for next year, and then next year do the same thing, because we won't know for sure how much until the spring of each year. Talking about infrastructure and ARP money, we got a $8.6 million grant from the state. It's actually ARP money that went to the state. I talked about this last year, but this ARP money, especially if it goes to the state, is taking forever to do. Can't help that. We're at their mercy. But We're spending it on things like water expansion with Cleveland Utilities, sewer improvements at Ocoee Utilities, water plant upgrades for Hiwassee Utilities. They provide water for most of the water for Cleveland and Bradley County. And then also some money going to Savannah Utilities and Charleston Calhoun Utilities. So it's not just things that benefit Bradley County government, but things that are improving the infrastructure throughout this Cleveland and Bradley County area. Other infrastructure things that I talked about last year, our ARP money, we're spending the part we can as fast as we can, and all for good causes, I believe. But a lot of it we set aside to match with state money. And for example, broadband, we've got $4 million set aside, but it's to match state grants, and state grants are like, they're taking forever, especially if it's ARP grants. But we have $4 million set aside for broadband. That's supposed to provide broadband for another 2,300 citizens that don't have it. That's not near all that need it, but that's a good start. And that $4 million, you're actually leveraging about $12 million by doing it that way. So we'll have $12 million of broadband expansion at some point, and we will have only put in the $4 million. Water, we've spent nearly $1.2 million invested in rural water projects. Many, many more people who live outside the city now have public water because of this program. It's still ongoing. Because of ARP, everything is moving so slowly, but at least a lot of it's been spent and the rest of it's set aside. Septic repair program. If you live outside the city, a lot of people were coming to us saying they had septic issues. It's not something government usually gets involved in, but we did have ARP money that could be used for sewer issues. We don't have a sewer system, so we said, why don't we put it out in the form of grants for septic repair programs? So we've done that. If you have a septic system that's failing, you could have applied. If it costs $10,000, we'll fund $8,000. You fund $2,000, you get your septic system. We've spent over $100 million doing that, which is in sort of like a sewer project. City and counties work very closely with the state for many years, and it's finally happening. If you travel down Georgetown Road, it's finally coming along. They are about halfway through with the Highway 60 widening. First it was Dalton Pike, then it was Georgetown. They should be through with Georgetown next year, and then they've actually announced that right-of-way acquisition will begin on North Lee Highway to finish where they stopped there at the 4-lane, 5-lane coming into 2, finish it on to Charleston. Right-of-way acquisition hopefully in 26. In the budget this year, revenues were flat. Why were they flat with all the growth we're having? Because of that thing called a ratio study that the state does every 3 years. This year they hit us with a 32% ratio study, which basically took away all the growth that we had in revenue. I often comment that the one good thing, the only thing I found good about Bidenomics is inflation does bring in more sales tax. So because of inflation, which is a very bad thing, sales tax is up. It was up last year and again this year. Some other things that we've done with ARP money, they're not on the street yet, but we've bought almost $700,000 worth of patrol cars for the Sheriff's Department. We've put a new roof and HVAC system in the Sheriff's Department, $1.1 million. New ambulances, new fire truck, $800,000 worth of park lights going on Menace Road in the next few weeks. Health Department, it's a grant match, so that one's moving slowly also, but we've renovated part of the Health Department, and now we're going to do the other half, hopefully this year. Affordable housing, we've spent $1.2 million on affordable housing. That's not a county project. That is a community project, because most of that housing is inside the city. But again, I never look at the city limits when I'm looking at projects. It's what's best for the community. So $1.2 million for affordable housing, and we also participated in library improvements with some of that ARP. So again, ARP rundown, over $1 million for the septic program, $4 million for broadband, $6.6 million for COVID response. That's things like fire trucks and ambulances, $1.1 million for water projects, $1.1 million for affordable housing. I'm proud of the way we've invested our ARP money. Now, I was totally against it because it's the big reason that started all the inflation was when federal government flooded our country with all this money. but we're trying to make the best use of it we can. In the meantime, prices are going up on these things just like they are with yours at home. So the inflation is killing it, but we've put it to good use, in my opinion. Thanks to I put together a plan on ARP and the county commission. A lot of people think we don't work together, but we usually work together pretty good, just like we do with the city. But we put together an ARP plan. The county adopted it, and we fine-tuned it 2 or 3 times in the last 2 years. But it's been a wonderful program that we've all worked together good on. I'm talking quick, but I've lost the track of time here. I wanted to mention our new county website. It's completely overhauled, bradleycountytn.gov. It's supposed to be more user-friendly, so if you haven't had a chance, go there and look. I want to mention the audit, another one of those boring subjects, but how many governments, how many people that speak to you talk about their audit? I'm always proud of our audit. Are there findings? Usually last year there was none, by the way. I had to brag about that last year at this time. I got to brag about it, but usually there's 1 or 2. We don't call them findings. The news media loves to say, Bradley County had this many findings. How many findings does the city have? Anybody know? You don't know, but I'm talking about them. But anyway, we usually have 1 or 2 findings, but they're not findings to me. They're opportunities for improvement. So the way I work with the auditors, they're going to always find something. And I'll give you some numbers here that justifies why they're going to always find something. But we do take them as opportunities for improvement. Over time, increases or decreases in the net position serve as a useful indicator of whether the financial position of the county is improving or deteriorating. You ever hear the net position of other governments? Where you came from? Did they ever report to you their net position? Probably not. Net position, if you're in the business, is like profit. I ended the year December 31st with how much profit? That's what you look at back there, Jim? Well, net position is what it is with government. We're not in the business to make a profit, don't get me wrong. But we're not in the business to go bankrupt or be in the red either, because if we do, then somebody's going to be proposing a tax increase. And I don't plan on doing that and work very hard not to. But the net position as of June the 30th of last year, which is the audit that just came out, was $63,291,000, which was an increase in net position of $7,455,000. Increase in net position is your profit. So the increase in net position, $7,455,000. Bradley County had total bonds. I report every year what our bonds are because a lot of people think we don't pay down on our bonds. But total bonds and other loans outstanding, $67,281,000. Our debt, total bonds, decreased by $7,433,000. That's how much we paid down on the debt. And if they quit approving debt, I'd get it paid off. But I'll never get there because you get it down, they bring it back up. But anyway, this year it went down to $67,281,000. What's the $67 million for? And I'm talking to the new people possibly because most of you have heard this, just different numbers, but the same story. Of the outstanding $67 million in debt, $57 million of it is for education, school buildings. And of that $57 million, $42 is for county schools and $15 for city schools. Again, we don't go by city limits. Bradley County maintains a AA2 rating from Moody's and a AA from Standard & Poor's, which is very important, something I worked very hard to maintain. We weren't there at first. It took us 3 or 4 years to get there, and now maintaining it's a challenge. But when it does come time to borrow money, the first thing I have to do is talk to those wonderful people in New York about ratings. I have to convince them that we know what we're doing here, and they usually don't know what they're talking about, but they're asking the questions, and you got to answer their questions. Maintaining that bond rating is very, very important. It determines the rate that we pay. And I didn't look this up before I came. I usually report on it. Over the last 20 years, our interest rates have averaged about 1%. About 1%. You hear people say, I don't like variable rate, let's get out of the variable debt. A lot of ours is in variable debt. About probably 45% is variable debt. Right now, that's not good. But over the last 20 years, it's averaged 1%. You can't get fixed rate at 1%, I'm sorry. Unassigned fund balance for the general fund, $9,152,000. That's something else that's a challenge because when commissioners see a fund balance, they tend to want to spend it. Well, we got a $9 million fund balance. Our policy requires a 10%. 10% doesn't do it. So what we were able to end this year with is a 20%. Why do you want a 20% fund balance? Because July, August, September, October, November, and finally in December, people start paying their taxes. I've got payroll every one of those months, every 2 weeks. I've got bills to pay. I've got utility bills. I've got all kinds of bills, July, August, September, and there's no revenue. I say no revenue. The gist of it doesn't come in until December, and most of it in January and February. If you don't have a fund balance, you borrow money. And we've done that for a few years until I was able to convince them we need a bigger fund balance. They didn't keep a bigger fund balance, and what do you do then? You got to go to the bank for cash flow to do the payroll. That's embarrassing. I don't do that anymore, and hopefully I don't have to anymore. When internal control issues are brought to our attention, we immediately take action to correct them. That's the opportunities for improvement I was talking about. For instance, under the Office of County Mayor this year, there was one finding. The following issue was brought to our attention, and we immediately went to work on it. And the finding was general fund, general ledger, payroll liability accounts were not reconciled on a monthly basis like they think they should be. Doesn't mean they're not reconciled, but most of the findings are, this time it wasn't, but you collected money and you didn't deposit it in 3 days. Recreation Department might collect it for a week and then deposit it. Well, that's a finding. You see what I'm saying? But they should deposit it in 3 days. And that's okay. That's an opportunity improvement. In this case, the liability accounts being reconciled were not done monthly. And our response was, we agree. That's how it should be. Finance Department's already put into place a reconciliation plan to reconcile on a monthly basis. Hopefully it'll occur each month, but at least more often. But now, when I said opportunities for improvement, just so you know, I work real hard at not growing government. We have one person in accounts payable. We have one person in payroll. We have one person in PO and purchasing and assets. One person. And you deal with them, man. It's one person that does all those things. The lady today that's doing the accounts payable, she will do thousands of checks, bills to be paid, and she'll get them done by herself. We don't have two. And we haven't grown that over the years. People say, why don't you add one? Well, there's been times I wish I did have more, but I'm just determined. We're not going to grow government. We're going to try to do a better job. 99,000 general ledger transactions last year. 42,000 invoices keyed, 36,000 warrants written, and 25,200 payroll checks. The accounts payable, one person. Payroll, one person. Cross-training is very important, and now I'm going through a period of time where I got someone that's been there for a long, long time that's going through a retirement phase, which I applaud her for that, but I hate retirement phases because they're really a challenge. But so somebody's got to be training to learn that before they go out and all this. So I wish there was more people there. But hopefully you're cross-trained and you can get through that. So recap, there was one audit finding for my office. There was other audit findings, by the way, but not for anything to do with the mayor, which is the finance part. No instances of non-compliance that were material to the financial statements. Our long-term debt decreased by $7.4 million. It was a good, clean audit, and a copy of the audit is on the state and county's website. I don't know how we are on time, but I want to abruptly stop right there and take questions. How much time do I have? It's just about 1 o'clock. Do I have time for one or two? If not, we'll yes, sir, and then we'll get out, because I know you want to be out here on time. Sorry.
I am going to ask the question.
Okay.
Because I feel like it's very, very important that we put the education of our kids first.
Uh-huh.
That's the reason. And it looks like to me, and my family is eat up with educators all the way from elementary to university, that the students of our county would be better served with a consolidated system. Now, to me, average Joe Blow on the street, it looks like that a stalwart person from the city and the county is going to have to stand up and say, I know it's going to be difficult, I know it's going to take time, but in the end, the recipient of that work will be the individual student in Franklin County.
If people will look at it for what's best for the students, how can we improve and make it even better? We do have two good school systems here, but there's no doubt it could be better. Am I bashing either one of them? No, I'm not. You take Paul back there, he's worked in both of them, right, Paul? Hopefully that will happen. but you've got so many turf issues. You got to understand turf battles. There's a long, tedious process. Someone's got to be willing to take it and go with it. I don't have a vote on the commission, or any of those things, but there is interest, and my intent and what they're after back here, because TV and different people have said we want to interview. I said it's not about me. This isn't even an election year. It's not about me. As I ended it, I said, it's just a thought. It's the time right now, in my opinion, to think about it, to talk about it, and see if there's any interest. It was studied a few years ago, and it didn't pass then because there was such a discrepancy between the two school systems as far as salaries and expenditures. That's not there anymore. And I'm not talking out both sides of my mouth. Two good school systems, but could we do it a little differently and make it even better? That's just the thought. Hopefully some people will take that and carry it forward, and it'll be talked about at least more over time, I hope. But
When you mention the word finding, as far as your the feedback that you were getting, to me, the flashing red sign was when the banner came out with the article that said Cleveland High was rated a B, and Walker Valley a B, and Bradley County a D, as far as their high schools are concerned. That's a wake-up call, at least to me.
it's at least time to look at it. It's just a thought, and I hope it'll be a thought that's out there. But again, if I say too much about it, then it's all about me, and that's nothing what it is. I had kids in the county school system for 32 years. I spread them out so daggum far that they were there forever. I don't have any now, but I do have grandkids in the school system. So I'm still involved. I had an educator stand up in a commission meeting, well, you're against education one time. And I said, sir, I've been involved in your school system longer than you have, even though, you know what I'm saying, because having gone there and so forth. But from the time my first one started, kindergarten, to the last time my youngest one ended, by the way, as a valedictorian, was 32 years. So I know the school system. I'm not knocking either one of them. But the citizens ought to be talking about what can we do better. That's really all I was saying. Yes, sir.
Are we getting any input from the state to maybe consolidate?
And I don't even like the word consolidation. That has negative connotation. There are processes in place that if the interest is there that you can follow, that you could do it this way or this way. And I'll say this on that subject and I'll stop. One smart aleck came on Facebook and said, well, it's worked really well for Hamilton County, hadn't it? Hamilton County was nothing like we are. Hamilton County City Schools, the inner city schools, was about to go bankrupt. They basically turned the keys over to the county and said, here, and I talked to Coppinger, the county mayor back then, a lot, and it was driving him crazy. He said, we're spending millions. So it was a bad situation. Are they better today? I don't know. Probably they are, but I don't know. But that wasn't what we're talking about here. Nobody's about to go bankrupt. It's just, can we do it better? I mean, we're such a wonderful community. When you talk about doing something better, sometimes a lot of people get defensive because most everybody's doing things well, don't get me wrong, but we can always do better. Again, the findings, I don't get mad with the finding. That's an opportunity for improvement. And the opportunities are out there in every aspect. And then someone else came on Facebook and said, well, why aren't you doing parks and recreation? They had a retirement a few years ago, and I suggested doing that. That was one of my departments. It wouldn't have been a long, complicated process like this, and there was no interest. So, again, I'm not trying to sell something. I'm just hoping to get people to thinking about it, and with a thought, maybe they will think about it and pursue it, or maybe they won't. I mean, maybe they're happy exactly the way it is. But anyway, enough on that. And my time's up, right? I'm not in no hurry. If there's something you want to say to me or ask me about, you can catch me afterwards. I would mention the pie chart. 43% of our budget goes to education, so we've got our priorities in order. And then when you get to the other 28%, it's law enforcement and emergency services. So basically, the county's in the business of education and emergency services, which is our biggest responsibility. A lot of differences in cities and counties. We have things we have to do. Cities get to choose what they do. Not knocking them, but they can choose to have a school system. They can choose to not have a jail. We have to have a jail. We have to have a landfill. We have to provide education. They could walk away and say, like Chattanooga did. So that's why there's so many differences in cities and counties. But I will say this, city and county works good together. We really do. I have no problem with any of them. City manager, city mayor, we get along great and work together great. The county commission right now we're working together great. So from top to bottom, you can feel good about this. It's not an election year, but from top to bottom, you have a wonderful group of elected officials in Bradley County, and it's great to work with all of them. I appreciate the opportunity you give me to work for you and to be here and speak about it today. Thank you.